Have you ever imagined being rejected by your own family just because of your appearance? Eleanor was given away as payment for a debt, but what no one expected was that the solitary farmer who received her would change everything. Eleanor grew up with the weight of rejection hanging over her shoulders like a constant shadow. From a very young age, she learned that her skin, marked by patches that spread across her body like uneven constellations, was reason enough for contempt from those who should have loved her above all else. Every look from her father, Arthur, was a silent sentence, and every gesture from Margaret, her mother, carried enough coldness to freeze even the strongest hearts. Samuel, her older brother, flourished under the warmth of paternal pride, while Eleanor was pushed into the shadows, constantly reminded that, in her family's eyes, she was nothing but a disappointment. She recalled small childhood episodes that might have seemed insignificant but shaped the pain she carried. Like the day when, at just 5 years old, she tried to show her father a drawing she had made for his birthday, only to be cut off with a grunt. "You wasted time on this." "I don't even know why I bother praising you," Arthur muttered without looking at her. She tucked the drawing away, silent tears streaming down her face, and promised herself never again to expect approval. Margaret, on the other hand, barely seemed to notice her at all. Whenever Eleanor entered a room, she would try to catch her mother's eye, but Margaret always turned away, too busy with anything else to acknowledge the daughter standing there with an open heart and pleading eyes. At school, Eleanor faced another kind of rejection. Other children, whether out of cruelty or brutal honesty, avoided her. The vitiligo, which made her look different, became the target of cruel nicknames and constant whispers. And when she looked for support at home, hoping for comfort, she found only reminders that she was different, that she did not belong to the normal world everyone else seemed invited to live in. Samuel, in contrast, was the pride of the family. He shone in everything he did: top grades at school, skill with horses, sports, and sweet words that easily won over both mother and father. Wherever he went, light and attention followed. Eleanor, sitting quietly at the dinner table, would watch the scene unfold, feeling invisible. Conversations about future plans, social gatherings, and Samuel's many accomplishments never included her. She tried to convince herself it didn't matter, that she didn't need their approval, but deep inside, the sting of rejection pulsed through her veins every single day, reminding her that she would never be enough. She dreamed of the impossible. She dreamed of someone who would look at her and see beyond the patches on her skin, someone who would recognize her sweetness, her sensitivity, her soul crying out for love. But those dreams were always cut short by the icy silence surrounding her at home. Once, when she was 9 years old, she tried to hug her mother after waking from a nightmare. "Mom, I had a bad dream," she whispered, trembling. Margaret didn't even turn to look at her. With a voice as distant as a stone wall, she replied, "Go back to bed. Dreams don't pay bills, Eleanor." It was in that moment the little girl realized affection wasn't something she would ever receive. Love wasn't meant for her. And Samuel, laughing at one of his father's remarks about his achievements, seemed to confirm, without uttering a single word, that there was no place for Eleanor in her family's heart. As she grew older, Eleanor became quiet, introspective, always watching, always withdrawing. The few moments of joy she allowed herself were those spent alone, reading old books, imagining worlds where she was cherished, or wandering the fields near the property where nature did not judge her appearance. She spoke to the trees and the birds, confiding her dreams and fears, receiving in return a silent yet comforting response. Even so, the fear of rejection never left her. Each visit from relatives, every party, every family gathering was a test of emotional endurance. Eleanor learned to hide her tears, to control her body so as not to show weakness, and to laugh when others laughed, even if it was only a hollow echo of joy. Time passed, and Eleanor turned 15, still marked by her skin and by the invisible wounds of her family's scorn. One day, while cleaning the sitting room, her father entered abruptly, shattering the monotony of her work. He was pale, his gaze hard, his fists clenched, clear signs that the news he carried would not be good. "Eleanor," Arthur said, his voice laced with impatience, "sit down. We have matters to discuss." She sat slowly, dread building inside her at what was to come. Samuel peeked curiously over his father's shoulder, but was soon dismissed to another room. Eleanor knew this was about her. A knot formed in her stomach, and she felt that every dream she had ever held, every hope of being loved, was about to be crushed. "My debt," Arthur began, choosing each word as though cutting into living flesh, "is great. And you are going to help pay it off." Eleanor's eyes widened, comprehension dawning in slow, painful waves. "What do you mean, Father?" Her voice faltered. He drew a deep breath, speaking as though he had repeated the words so often they had lost all meaning. "You will be given away as payment. I don't have time for sentimentality. This isn't personal. You know that. You're worth less than the money I owe." The words struck her like stones, crushing every fragment of hope. Eleanor felt a piercing cold run up her spine, tears welling unbidden in her eyes. Her world, already small and shadowed, seemed to collapse completely. Samuel turned away, perhaps relieved it wasn't him, and Margaret remained silent, unmoved, as if her daughter's suffering were nothing more than an inconvenience. And there, sitting on the floor of the living room, her heart shattered and her soul battered, Eleanor grasped the cruel truth that would mark her forever. She was not the daughter of a loving family. She didn't belong. To those who should have protected her, she was nothing more than an object, a form of currency, a burden to be cast aside. Yet in that instant of absolute despair, something began to stir within her. A faint spark of resistance, a quiet hope, small though it was, that somewhere someone might see her differently. Eleanor didn't know then that this fragile spark would become the light guiding her out of the darkness surrounding her, and that one day she would discover she was meant to be more than just rejected. The car rocked gently along the dirt road, raising small clouds of dust with every bump. Eleanor curled up on the seat, hugging herself as if she could shield her body from the entire world. Her heart was racing, her breath uneven, and the crushing sensation that at last everything was lost weighed on her chest. Eleanor's father, seated in the front, kept his face rigid, eyes fixed on the road ahead, ignoring his daughter's silent tears in the back seat. There were no apologies, no hesitation. To him, Eleanor was not a daughter, not someone to be loved or protected. She was nothing more than currency, a debt to be settled. "You'll stay with him," her father said curtly, without even glancing back. "He's the farmer who lent me the money. With you, I consider the debt paid." Eleanor didn't reply. She only swallowed her sobs, feeling his words cut through her like blades. Every syllable was a reminder that her life had never been considered. She thought of the embraces she never received, the celebrations she was never part of, the words of pride she never heard. Samuel, her brother, was probably somewhere smiling, oblivious, or perhaps indifferent to the pain his existence carved into hers. "Father," Eleanor finally dared, her voice trembling, "this isn't right. I can't." Her father turned his face briefly, as if the sound of his own daughter's voice were a nuisance. "Be quiet, Eleanor. This isn't about right or wrong. It's about paying debts. Do you understand? There's no room for sentiment here. You're worth less than what I owe." His voice was icy, stripped of any shred of compassion. Eleanor felt the ground vanish beneath her. She wanted to scream, to beg, to plead with him to reconsider, but no words would ever be enough. No words had ever been enough to change the way her family saw her, as shame, as someone disposable. When the car stopped in front of the farm, Eleanor saw Nathaniel for the first time. He stood in the shade of the porch, arms crossed, watching her with deep, unreadable eyes. He didn't smile, didn't make welcoming gestures, didn't utter empty words. He was a man of few words, with a presence both intense and cold, but there was something in that silence that unsettled her. It was different from her father's coldness. Her father opened the door and shoved her out as though she were nothing more than a sack of belongings. "She's yours now. Make good use of her," Eleanor's father said, stepping out of the car with firm strides. Without waiting for a reply, he extended his hand to Nathaniel. The handshake was brief, firm, stripped of warmth, businesslike, as though sealing a contract rather than deciding the fate of his own daughter. Nathaniel returned the gesture with the same restrained coldness. No smile, no comforting words. Her father climbed back into the car, started the engine and drove away, dust rising in his wake, leaving Eleanor standing at the farm's entrance, her heart clutched by the suffocating realization that her life had just been handed over to someone who saw her only as payment. Eleanor collapsed to her knees at the edge of the farm. The property was impressive. Vast fields of green stretched as far as the eye could see, bordered by neat white fences, organized barns, and animals grazing under the setting sun. Ancient trees cast long shadows, and the air carried the fresh scent of soil and newly cut grass. It was beautiful, immense, and utterly intimidating. Her tears flowed freely now, mixing with the dust on her face. Everything she had known, the fragile life she thought she could cling to, was gone. The sense of abandonment was suffocating. She felt as though the entire world had conspired to strip her of every hope, casting her into an unknown place, alone, unloved. Nathaniel remained still, watching her intently. When Eleanor finally lifted her gaze, searching for something human in this stranger, he only said, "Stand up." The command was simple, direct, yet different from her father's coldness. He wasn't shouting, wasn't insulting, wasn't diminishing her. There was silent authority in his tone, but also an implicit respect, as if her mere existence already held value. "You will live here with me," Nathaniel continued, his voice low but firm. "There is no reason to be afraid. You are not currency, you are not merchandise. This is simply a place to begin, a home." Eleanor trembled. Confusion swept through her. She still believed she had been sold, that her life was now just a transaction, property belonging to another man. But there was something different here. He didn't touch her, didn't speak with false sweetness. He only observed her, as if weighing the depth of her soul. I don't understand," she whispered, wiping tears with the back of her hand. "You don't need to understand now," Nathaniel replied. "Just come." The walk to the house was quiet, broken only by the creak of the gate and Eleanor's steps on the dry earth. She took in every tree, every pasture, every animal, as though it were part of a dream she didn't dare believe was real. The workers' cottages, the barns, and the grand main house seemed to belong to a world completely different from the one Eleanor had known. And yet fear outweighed any glimmer of hope. What if it was all a facade? What if this man, like everyone else, eventually rejected her? When they reached the porch of the large wooden house, Nathaniel turned briefly. "I hear you'll be safe," he said. The phrase was short, almost neutral, but carried a weight of sincerity. "If you need something, ask, but don't expect indulgence or easy favors. This is your home now." Eleanor only nodded, unable to speak. She didn't know whether to feel relief or terror. Never before had anyone offered her even the slightest chance of being treated as human, and now, without warning, she was being set down in this strange world before a man who spoke little but whose presence demanded she exist with dignity. Later that night, as she settled into a small room at the back of the house, Eleanor realized she was alone with her thoughts for the first time since childhood. The tears came again, but this time they carried something different, not just fear, but a spark of curiosity. Who was this man? Why didn't he see her the way her father did? Why, despite his cold reserve, did his gestures carry a trace of respect? She didn't know, and perhaps she didn't need to know just yet. What mattered was that, painful as her delivery had been, something inside her had begun to awaken, a shy, nearly imperceptible hope that her life might finally be more than rejection and abandonment. And that night, alone in the farm's guest room, Eleanor made a silent vow she would survive, even if no one believed in her. And maybe, just maybe, that terrible handover could become the beginning of something she had never dared to dream. The morning sun slipped timidly into the small room, waking Eleanor before her inner clock. For the first time in years, she felt something new upon waking. No immediate fear of rejection, no desperate urge to flee. There was curiosity, there was expectation. When she came down the stairs, she found Nathaniel already waiting on the porch. He didn't speak right away, just watched her. His gaze was intense, profound, as though trying to decipher every fragment of her fear and every shadow of her hope. He didn't smile, didn't gesture, didn't offer hollow words of comfort. He simply stood there, solid, steady, a silent anchor in the chaos of Eleanor's life. "Good morning," he said at last, his voice low, firm, but calm. "Today I'll show you the farm." Eleanor swallowed hard, feeling a mix of fear and fascination. The farm was enormous, far greater than she could have imagined. Lush fields stretched to the horizon, white fences enclosed pastures with horses, cows, and sheep. Vast barns held equipment, and narrow trails wound between centuries-old trees, flowers, and gardens. Every corner carried its own care, its own order, and yet there was a natural beauty, a living harmony in the air. "Ah, here you'll be safe," Nathaniel said, pointing toward the workers' cottages, each neat, organized, with porches adorned with flowers. "You won't need to work, but I want you to know every corner. It's important you understand where you are, and that this belongs to you too, in a way." Eleanor's heart sped up. This was no ordinary farm. It was almost like a kingdom of its own. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't an unwelcome guest. The workers who passed by greeted her respectfully, without expecting her to perform tasks or prove her worth. She only had to exist, to walk, to see, to belong. As they walked, Nathaniel paused from time to point something out. "These horses each have different temperaments. You'll notice that every one of them demands patience." "And those goats?" Eleanor asked, enchanted. "They respond better when you speak to them, not just when you try to force them." He smiled faintly, a rare, almost imperceptible gesture, but one that warmed Eleanor's heart. Despite his restrained voice and economical movements, every one of Nathaniel's actions carried meaning. He was a man of few words, but his deeds spoke volumes. A careful look that conveyed concern, a gesture of offering a coat when the wind picked up, a piece of fruit left discreetly on the table. Nothing was exaggerated, nothing theatrical. Every gesture was a silent proof that he cared, that he saw Eleanor as someone worthy of attention and respect. With each step, Eleanor felt the weight of her years of rejection begin to lift. For the first time, someone wasn't staring at the patches on her skin, wasn't treating her like a burden, wasn't comparing her to her favored brother. Nathaniel didn't make empty speeches, nor did he try to win her over with forced kindness. He simply showed, in small, steady ways, that he respected her presence. And for Eleanor, that was nothing short of revolutionary. The following days passed in a way that felt almost magical. Eleanor had her own routine, but without heavy obligations. She fed the animals when she wished, learned about the crops with Nathaniel, helped organize small tasks, but there was never pressure or demand. The workers, discreet and efficient, carried on with their duties, while Eleanor merely observed, learned, and, for the first time, felt included in a world that had always been beyond her reach. Nathaniel remained reserved, but always attentive. He didn't need words to show authority or care. A single look when someone mishandled an animal, a gesture to prevent an oncoming danger, or simply standing at Eleanor's side as she explored the fields, his silent protection was stronger than any spoken assurance. Slowly, Eleanor began to feel something she had never known before: trust. Trust that she could exist without the constant fear of rejection. There were still days when the past haunted her. Cruel memories of her father, her brother's cutting words, her mother's disapproving gaze. But the sense of safety on the farm, combined with Nathaniel's quiet presence, wove an invisible armor around her, a shield against those old wounds. On certain mornings, when Nathaniel watched her handle the animals or walk through the fields, Eleanor felt that she didn't have to prove anything to anyone. She could simply be herself. And for the first time, her reflection in the mirror didn't show her only as the rejected daughter, but as someone who could exist, learn, grow, and perhaps one day be loved. And so the days went on. Eleanor exploring the fields, learning about the horses, helping in the gardens, watching the workers' routine, discovering small joys in the simple rhythms of farm life. Nathaniel was always there, silent but present, sometimes offering a piece of advice, sometimes merely observing, allowing her to grow at her own pace. With every sunset, Eleanor felt her fear of rejection diminish. Little by little, the old emotional wounds began to heal. For the first time, she could imagine a future without the looming shadow of her family's scorn. And gradually, the farm that had once seemed so intimidating became a home, a place where she might, at last, belong. It was a hot afternoon, the high sun casting light over the fields, the smell of freshly tilled earth mingling with the perfume of flowers that grew around the main house. Eleanor wandered through the gardens, admiring the harmony of the farm, when she came across one of the workers, a middle-aged woman named Clara, gathering vegetables from the kitchen garden. "Hello, Miss Eleanor," Clara greeted her warmly, smiling. "Are you enjoying the place?" "Yes. It's amazing," Eleanor replied, still astonished by every detail of the farm, every organized and lively corner. "I never imagined a place could be like this. So perfect." Clara nodded, lifting a basket brimming with produce. "He takes care of everything with great attention, but don't be fooled. He's not a man who talks much about himself." She glanced at Eleanor, sensing her curiosity. "I know you must be wondering why he's so reserved, aren't you?" Eleanor flushed slightly, lowering her gaze for an instant before looking back at Clara. "Yes, I've noticed he hardly ever speaks to me, and when he does, he's always so serious." "Why is he like that?" Clara sighed, as if weighing her words carefully. "Nathaniel has a painful past," she said softly, almost as though she didn't want anyone else to overhear. "He has suffered a great deal, and that shaped the way he faces the world. But despite everything, he is a good man, serious, honest, and fair. Anyone under his protection is safe." Eleanor looked toward Nathaniel, who was farther off, tending to some horses, silent as always, yet every movement showing discipline and care. Even from a distance, she could see the strength and respect he carried. "One day, you'll learn what happened to him," Clara continued with a faint, enigmatic smile. "But for now, just watch. He doesn't speak much, but his actions say more than any words." Eleanor nodded, a mix of curiosity and fascination stirring in her chest. Why was he so cold? Why did he keep that distance? Yet at the same time, she felt something comforting. Even from afar, he did not reject her, did not belittle her. There was a vast difference between her father's coldness and Nathaniel's reserve. He might speak little, but there was sincerity in his actions, a quiet respect that made her feel valued. As she walked back to the porch of the main house, Eleanor realized her curiosity was only growing. She wanted to understand Nathaniel, to discover what in his past had made him so serious, so restrained. but she also felt something new: trust. She could draw closer, watch, learn from him, without fear of being cast aside. And that afternoon, beneath the warmth of the sun and the whisper of the trees, Eleanor made a small, silent promise. She would learn to know this man, uncover his story, and perhaps understand why a heart so scarred could still be at the same time so safe and good. Nathaniel's mystery was becoming part of her own life, and Eleanor began to realize that perhaps she wasn't just learning about the farm or the animals. She was learning about trust, protection, and what it meant to finally have a place where she could belong. 2 days passed since her conversation with Clara. Eleanor still carried her curiosity about Nathaniel, about what might have happened in his past to make him so reserved and yet so careful. It was a quiet curiosity, almost reverent, but it drove her to watch every gesture of his, every moment he interacted with the animals or walked through the fields. That afternoon, as she walked down one of the hallways that led to the bedrooms of the main house, something caught her attention. Nathaniel's door was slightly ajar. She knew he had gone out early to ride, as he did almost every day, and the room seemed quiet. An impulse, part curiosity, part hesitation, made Eleanor slowly approach. "Maybe I shouldn't," she whispered to herself, but curiosity won. She pushed the door lightly and stepped inside. The room was simple, masculine, tidy, but something there made her stop in the middle of it. On the nightstand by the bed sat a picture frame. Eleanor moved closer and saw the image. Nathaniel was smiling, radiant, with a woman at his side. Both looked happy, a genuine smile lighting up their faces. The scene was so unexpected, so intimate, that Eleanor felt as if she had intruded on something she was never meant to see. Fascinated, she stood there, studying every detail of the photograph, every trace of expression on his face. She didn't notice the sound of the door closing behind her until it was interrupted by Nathaniel's firm, cold voice. "What were you doing in here?" He entered the room quickly, his eyes fixed on her, the surprise on his face sharpening into alarm. Eleanor blushed at once, her heart racing. Words tangled on her tongue, and stammering she managed, It was by accident." Nathaniel strode toward her, his hand snatching the frame from Eleanor's grasp, his eyes glinting with a mixture of irritation and unease. "You shouldn't be going through my things," he said, his voice loaded with authority, though he did not shout. "Invading someone's privacy is unacceptable." Before she could answer, he turned to leave the room but stopped abruptly. His hand reached for Eleanor's arm, firm yet gentle. "Wait, forgive me. I didn't mean to speak to you like that," he murmured, his expression softening. "It's just, I'm not used to having my private life exposed." He stepped back slightly, then sat down on the bed, his body tense, drawing a deep breath. Eleanor stood frozen for a few moments, unsure, until she slowly moved closer and sat beside him. The room was silent, but heavy with emotion. Nathaniel held the frame in his hands, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. She was my wife." His eyes welled with tears, but he quickly turned his face away, trying to hide them. "She died in an accident, right here on the ranch, a few years ago." Eleanor said nothing, feeling the weight of the revelation. His restrained, fleeting tears made her chest tighten. She placed her hand over his, touching it gently, as if to convey understanding and support without needing words. I'm so sorry," Eleanor said softly, her voice trembling. "You're not alone, Nathaniel. You don't have to carry this all by yourself." He sighed, taking in the unexpected comfort of her touch, though years of grief still held his body stiff. "After she was gone," he began, his voice low and rough, "I became this way, cold, distant. It was the only way I found to shield myself from the pain, to keep from feeling the loss too deeply, to stop myself from ever being vulnerable again." Eleanor pressed his hand gently but firmly. "You don't have to protect yourself alone anymore. I'm here, if you'll let me be." At last, he looked at her. His eyes were still wet, but there was a glimmer of recognition in them, of something he hadn't felt in a long time. Her presence beside him seemed to soften part of the burden he carried. "You," he started, then paused, drawing in a deep breath. "You understand me in a way no one else ever has. It's strange, because we barely know each other, and yet you seem to see past what I show." Eleanor smiled shyly, yet sincerely. "Maybe it's because I know what it feels like to be lonely and unwanted, and I don't want you to feel that way too." Nathaniel stayed silent for a moment, but the tension in his grip eased. The room, once weighed down by sorrow and secrecy, now seemed to hold trust and care. For the first time, Nathaniel didn't need many words to show that he cared, and Eleanor realized that despite all the coldness he showed the world, there was a man within him capable of love, of protection, of opening up, even if slowly. And that afternoon, between whispered words and quiet glances, Eleanor felt something awaken inside her. The certainty that despite past losses and wounds, together they might find a path to healing, a way toward trust, toward affection, and perhaps toward love. In the days that followed that afternoon, Eleanor sensed something had shifted between her and Nathaniel. It wasn't an instant romance. There were no declarations of affection or grand gestures. It was subtler than that, almost invisible to anyone else, yet powerful to those living it, the slow building of trust and understanding between two wounded hearts. Early in the mornings, Eleanor would walk through the fields and see Nathaniel already at work with the animals, always silent, always steady. She learned to notice the small signs of his attention, the way he checked that the horses were calm before riding, the care with which he fed the cattle, the respect with which he treated every creature. Simple gestures, yet they revealed his kindness without a single word. One such morning, Eleanor approached him timidly. "Nathaniel, may I help you with the horses?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though her heart was racing. He lifted his gaze to her briefly, weighing her stance. He said nothing, only motioned with his hand for her to come closer. Together, they cared for the animals in silence. He taught her with gestures and glances, showing her what to do, never raising his voice or rebuking her. Every bit of guidance was given patiently, and Eleanor felt that even in silence, he respected her. Another day, while she was watering the plants in the garden, Nathaniel appeared carrying a small basket of freshly picked fruit. He set it down beside her without a word, just a discreet look that conveyed care. Eleanor lifted her eyes and met his, and for the briefest moment, a nearly imperceptible smile crossed his face. Nothing else was needed. That simple gesture said it all. Clara, the housemaid who had once spoken to Eleanor about his past, watched from a distance and smiled at the young woman. "He doesn't say much, but every action of his speaks louder than 1,000 words," she remarked. "You'll learn how to read him, to know when he truly cares." Eleanor began paying attention to the details. When Nathaniel sat under the shade of the trees to rest, she noticed how he always found a way to shield her from the sun. When they walked across the fields, there was a quiet watchfulness, making sure she didn't stumble or stray too far. Each gesture was discreet, almost invisible, but each carried deep meaning. He was attentive to her, concerned for her, even if he didn't say so aloud. A few days later, on an afternoon that stretched into evening, Eleanor decided to take a walk alone through the gardens of the ranch. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and purple, and she sat on a wooden bench near the lake. A gentle breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the scent of freshly blossomed flowers and the distant sounds of animals settling in for the night. She gazed at the sky, darkening slowly, and for the first time in a long while, felt she could breathe without fear. Memories of the past seemed more distant there, in that quiet, safe space. She began watching the first stars appear, blinking shyly on the horizon. Beautiful, aren't they? Nathaniel's calm, firm voice emerged from behind her, making her shiver. Eleanor turned and found Nathaniel standing a few steps away. He didn't approach immediately. He simply stood there in silence, watching the sky with her. The weight of the quiet was comforting, as if it weren't necessary to fill every moment with words. She noticed something that surprised her. He was looking at her differently. There was no judgment, no intrusive curiosity, no remarks about her vitiligo-marked skin that had so often made her feel inadequate. At that moment, Eleanor was just herself. No masks, no shame, no fear. "Yes, very beautiful," Eleanor replied softly, almost whispering. "I've always wanted to look at the stars like this, without hurry, without fear." Nathaniel remained by her side, now seated on the bench, watching the stars reflected in the lake. He didn't need to speak much. His presence alone was enough to calm the remaining anxieties in Eleanor's heart. "You're getting used to being here, Eleanor," he finally said, his voice low, firm, but without pressure. "And that pleases me." She smiled shyly, feeling a warmth rise to her cheeks. I don't know if I deserve that," she murmured, looking at her hands resting in her lap. Nathaniel turned to her, his deep eyes reflecting the starlight. "It's not about deserving," he said. He paused, measuring each word. "Here, you only need to exist. That is enough." Eleanor felt her heart race, and for a moment, the entire world seemed to shrink to that bench, that lake, that silent man who made her feel whole for the first time. She lifted her eyes to him, and he returned her gaze. There was no need for words, only a connection they both felt and recognized. Nathaniel took a step closer, the silence heavy with meaning. Eleanor, sensing the closeness, drew a deep breath, her body alert to every movement. He extended his hand gently, and she did not pull back. "Eleanor," he began, his voice filled with restrained emotion, "I never wanted you to feel alone." She looked at him, feeling a pang of tenderness, a mixture of fear and courage. I don't feel alone, Nathaniel," she said, her voice steady, though trembling, "because you're here." An instant of absolute silence followed. Then, almost reflexively, he leaned in and pressed his lips to hers, a soft, contained kiss, full of promise and feelings that had until then remained hidden. Eleanor responded, feeling the intensity of the gesture, not in words, but in the care and protection he conveyed through that simple touch. When they parted, breathing together, Eleanor felt something awaken within her. The certainty that, even in the face of all the pain and past wounds, there was room for love, trust, and hope. Nathaniel was still there, silent and reserved, but with gestures that spoke louder than any words ever could. They remained together for some time, gazing at the stars, feeling the night breeze and the quiet security they shared. Eleanor couldn't help but think that this man saw her in a way no one ever had. Whole, dignified, valuable, and that he never once mentioned her marked skin, as if that painful detail of her life simply didn't matter. For Eleanor, that moment became a turning point. For the first time, she knew she could allow herself to feel, to trust, and perhaps to love. As the moon rose in the sky, reflecting on the calm lake, Eleanor realized her life, so full of pain and rejection, was beginning to change. And Nathaniel, a man of few words but profound actions, was by her side, showing that even wounded hearts could learn to trust again. After that kiss beneath the starry sky, Eleanor felt something shift within her. There was a new sense of security, a feeling of belonging, a confidence she had never known. But the fragile peace she had built so carefully was about to be challenged. That afternoon, as she walked through the front gardens, Eleanor saw a familiar shadow. Her heart froze. Samuel was there, arrogant and imposing, wearing that look of superiority that had always terrified her. "Well, well," Samuel said, approaching slowly, each step dripping with disdain. "Looks like you finally think you might have some worth, just because you're with the farmer now." His words cut Eleanor like sharp knives. Everything she had tried to build in her new life seemed to crumble under her brother's cruel gaze. He continued, harsh and derisive. "You've always been the shame of the family. You know that, don't you? Those spots on your skin, they've always made you feel small, and look at you now, thinking you're important. Pathetic." Blood rushed to Eleanor's head, but before she could react, Nathaniel appeared. He was calm, but there was a light in his eyes that made the air around him feel heavy. He didn't speak immediately. He simply positioned himself between Eleanor and Samuel, his stance firm, unyielding. "Stop," Nathaniel said, his voice low, loaded with authority. "Do not touch her." "Who are you to tell me what I can or cannot do?" Samuel replied, attempting to maintain his tone of superiority, but the farmer's firmness made him falter. Nathaniel stepped forward, every word now charged with an intensity Eleanor had never heard from him. "You may be her blood, but you were never family." His voice rose, slicing the air like cold steel. "I said, stop!" Samuel instinctively took a step back, but Nathaniel did not lower his voice. "No more words," he roared, his normally controlled, silent eyes now burning with contained fury. "You humiliate, you despise, you mistreat, but from now on, I am the one who decides her worth. Do you understand? And if you dare lay a hand on her again, I swear you will regret it." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. She had never seen Nathaniel like that, so explosive, but his anger was not empty. It was protective, a pure fire directed at anyone who dared to harm someone he cared for. Samuel froze. His arrogance vanished, replaced by a mixture of fear and surprise. He tried to open his mouth to protest, but Nathaniel stepped forward another pace, firm and relentless. "You may be her blood, but you were never family. From now on, she has me." The finality in his tone was like a sentence. "And make this very clear. If you think of hurting her, not even the ground will hold your feet." The impact of Nathaniel's words and posture was overwhelming. Humiliated, Samuel took a step back, then another, until he disappeared among the shrubs and fences of the ranch, without a backward glance. Eleanor remained still for a moment, absorbing every detail. Her heart raced, but not from fear, relief. For the first time, someone was fighting for her like no one ever had. Nathaniel took a deep breath, still tense, fists clenched. He turned slowly toward Eleanor, his expression softening, though the intensity remained. "It's okay," he said, his voice firm, but now carrying calm once more. "He won't hurt you again, never again." Eleanor stepped closer, letting the tears flow freely, but this time they were tears of relief and gratitude. She held his hand, feeling the firmness, the protection, and the care contained in that silent gesture. "Thank you," Eleanor whispered, her voice trembling, "for protecting me." "You don't need to thank me," Nathaniel replied, gently squeezing her hand. "I won't allow anyone to make you feel small. Never again." In that moment, Eleanor realized something that would change her life forever. She was no longer the rejected daughter, the shadow of disdain. Beside Nathaniel, she was valued, protected, and truly loved. And for the first time, she felt she could exist fully, without fear, without shame, without pain. The next day, after Eleanor's brother had disappeared among the ranch paths, a comforting silence filled the air. The sun shone gently, warming the fields and centuries-old trees, and Eleanor felt for the first time that she could breathe without the weight of family oppression. Nathaniel was nearby, seated on the veranda of the large wooden house. He watched her with that deep, serene gaze, yet one charged with something Eleanor still didn't fully understand. She approached slowly, heart racing, fear and hope mingling. "Eleanor," Nathaniel began, his voice low, firm, yet now laden with emotion. "Since you arrived here, from the very first moment my life changed. I never thought anyone could make me feel alive again." A warmth rose in Eleanor's chest. Her body trembled slightly and tears began to fall without warning. "Nathaniel, She tried to speak, but her voice failed. He took a deep breath, holding her hands between his. The touch was firm, protective, full of care. "I know you have suffered. I know the world hasn't been kind to you, but I want you to know," he continued, voice thick with emotion, "that here, with me, you will never be alone. I can't promise life will always be easy, but I promise I will stand by your side. Always." Eleanor felt her heart tighten with emotion. His words, spoken with such care and sincerity, penetrated every wound she carried. "Nathaniel," she whispered, finally allowing her tears to flow freely. I don't want to be afraid anymore either." He leaned closer, bringing his face near hers, and she felt the warmth of his breath mingle with her own. Then, "Stay with me," he said, in a whisper that seemed to carry all the love and protection he had always kept inside. And in that instant, there was no more fear, no past, no rejection, just two wounded hearts finally finding solace in each other. Nathaniel gently drew her close, and they embraced, tears and smiles mingling, in a moment full of tenderness and emotion. The world seemed to fade away, leaving only them, in a home that at last Eleanor could truly call hers. Over time, the ranch became Eleanor's true refuge. Every corner reminded her of first discoveries, of Nathaniel's attentive gaze, of silent moments and gestures of care that had built trust and love between them. She finally felt at home. A few years later, the afternoon sun gently illuminated the expansive ranch. Eleanor walked through the fields, now with light, confident steps, accompanied by the laughter of her children, playing among the flowers and animals. Nathaniel was by her side, watching with that same silent, steady, and attentive gaze she had learned to love. Eleanor paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and smiled. The vitiligo that had once been a source of shame and rejection now gleamed under the sunlight as a symbol of her strength, of everything she had overcome. "Nathaniel," she said, leaning on his arm, "we did it." He held her hand firmly, looking at her with deep eyes filled with love and tenderness. "Yes, Eleanor, we did it." He smiled, and in that moment, the ranch was no longer just a property. It was a home, a symbol of the love that had transformed their lives. Eleanor watched her children running across the fields, feeling happiness pulse in her heart. For a moment, the past seemed distant, almost like a dream. She had been rejected, humiliated, marked by disdain, but now, embraced by life, love, and the family she had chosen, she felt complete. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of the flowers, and Eleanor knew, finally, that every wound, every tear, every moment of pain had brought her here, home to Nathaniel, to true love, and she smiled, fully aware that life, despite everything, could be beautiful.